Hello and welcome to Seeing Red. It is May 20th, 2024. I am Will Leitch here, as always, with the great Bernie Miklasz. Follow us on Twitter at Seeing Red Pod. Email us seeingredpod@gmail.com. Lots of emails this week. Lots of nice comments about the show last week. I think at our best on this show, Bernie, we tap into Cardinals fans' frustrations, anxieties, and frustrations. I think really frustrations is the overarching issue. I think we certainly did that last week. And the Cardinals responded. You're welcome, Cardinals Nation. 4-2 for the Cardinals this week. Once again, unable to finish off a sweep. And not to start out with the complaining part of this, because I think they scored a lot of runs this week, and I would like to talk about that.
Sure.
But you know, I feel like this works best is also certainly a more meaty conversation topic when you're talking about this is always going to be sort of a front office and people in charge of the Cardinals related show rather than a players related show. Sometimes we'll talk about, players like, at a certain level, we can talk about players aren't doing well, but it seems more interesting and more fruitful to talk about mistakes the front office make rather than to yell at Paul Goldschmidt to hit better. And which he has been doing, by the way. So I found myself frustrated as they kind of feel like the hitting is turning the corner a little bit this week. And the opportunity to potentially sweep a Red Sox team that is under 500, but still good and competitive. And then you're back out with Matthew Liberatore on the mound. Now no longer in that spot start just to get us through period. Now in the we're messing him up as both a starter and a reliever notion. I understood the idea of Liberatore doing one start because the spot start is a spot start, but you don't get three spot starts. By your third start, you're the option, and now they're talking about having to move that. I think it's a bit of a shame, and I think speaks to the overarching problems that derailed last year and could still potentially, now that the offense is going a little bit better, derail this year. The lack of pitching depth and the fact that Liberatore's 3 starts in has really now they've cost them one of their nicer relievers, and he's in a total mess right now. I remember when we talked in the whole offseason, Bernie, about like, are they really going to get 3 pitchers? They're not going to really get 3 pitchers. And then they really got 3 pitchers, and that still doesn't seem like enough pitchers.
No, it's like, okay, we're done. Thank you. Well, you're welcome. I appreciate. Yeah, you thanked us for that. Well, you're welcome. No, it's the same old stuff. I mean, I've been writing about this repeatedly. I mean, the Cardinals basically forfeited a huge advantage they had for a long period of time, which is drafting, developing, cultivating, starting pitching, and getting a young flow of talent, starting pitching wise, that would just come to the majors and fill a role, and in many cases be very, very good. And a lot of the guys that were starting pitchers were moved to the bullpen, and they became very, very good. That's all been lost. It's just gone. And I think if anybody still needed to do convincing, and I don't think anybody does, but if anybody still needed convincing, this Liberatore situation just pretty much reaffirms everything that we have been saying about their failure in the pitching development department. The idea, okay, I'm with you. I mean, the first start, it was relatively short notice. Okay, no problem. You give him one start, and he didn't pitch many innings, but he gave up 1 run in 3 2/3 of the White Sox. And you say, okay, for a spot start, they'll take it. That's all right. Could be worse. But they keep running him back out there, and he's just getting pummeled. And at what point do they wake up, or are they? At what point do they admit, well, we don't have a better alternative? So we'll have to go.
That's a good question.
Yeah, they don't, and they'll never admit it, though. They won't acknowledge it. And part of it, I think, is they're also stubborn. It's kind of like, well, okay, you all have been ripping us forever about this trade. We sent a Rosarina to Tampa Bay for Liberatore. By golly, we're going to prove to you that he was a good pitcher, and that we had reasons for getting him. And if they would just let him develop as a reliever, where, as you pointed out, he showed so much potential and he can be very, very effective. I don't know that people would be as upset by that trade now, but they are convinced, no, he's going to be a starter any chance we get, and we're going to show you. And all they're doing is showing us they have no idea what they're doing, because his stats, I'm not going to read them all, they're horrible. And he's, as a starting pitcher especially, he has nothing that can neutralize right-handed batters. I mean, they just, Alex Cora Sunday, I mean, he was probably thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. He loaded up his lineup with 8 right-handed hitters and they destroyed Liberatore. I mean, so why do they keep running the same thing out there over and over again and think that it somehow will be different next time? It's really an embarrassment to the organization. If they're capable of embarrassment, I'm not so sure they are.
I To me, like, the thing with Liberatore, it's one thing to not have it's bad, obviously, that they don't have, like, Liberatore is may I don't know if he's their best option, but you don't look and they don't have anybody developed to go to that spot, and the fact is Mats the idea that you were gonna get 180 innings from Mats this season, even if this injury hadn't happened, was kind of absurd, but they had no backup in that. But the problem with the Liberatore thing is you're actually messing up a piece in the bullpen that was working. And I know they feel like the bullpen is a strict, and I get that. I understand where they're coming from. That they've got guys coming back though. Middleton, I kept hearing Middleton's close, and then he keeps not coming back. So we'll see about that. But to me, the problem with the Liberatore thing is that obviously it's not working as a starter. But you're messing up not just but it's not like you're messing up a, brain looper guy who you're pulling back and forth between the rotation and the bullpen. You're messing up a guy who's still young and you have like a lot of investment in, and clearly is a guy that's kind of been jerked around all over the place,
Right.
in a lot of places. I look and listen, it's not like things are like rolling in Memphis. But, I think that like Sim Roberts has looked okay down there. You know who's actually been pretty good starting in Memphis? Andre Palante has actually looked weirdly okay down there. Not that I'm eager to see Zach Thompson hasn't looked too bad down there. I don't like Zach Thompson. I feel like you're in the middle of a process with him, and maybe you're in the middle of a process with Palante too. But you're also in the middle of a process with Liberatore. And to me, like I do feel you saw kind of Marmol's quotes after the game. Certainly, it sounds like this is probably like it doesn't sound like they're going to do Liberatore thing again. It feels
They
like
can't.
maybe a couple starts late on that. I mean, again, the one spot start became 3 spot starts, but I think it speaks to when people complain. I want to get to John Mozeliak's interview that he did with Frank Cusimano this week. But one of the things he talked about was, I think, something we all kind of understand because we said something similar at the beginning of the year, which was, I think we expected this offense to be better, and they haven't been better. They have been better recently, and I do want to talk about that. But the main reason the Cardinals are games under 500 right now is because the hitters have not been what we thought they were going to be. But the big warning sign that I kept saying without the batters, when the batters aren't doing well, is like, these batters might come around and the Cardinals still have this pitching problem. And they're really kind of, this pitching is being held together with Baylor. Lance Lynn has not been very good lately. That's a problem. This 5th spot is not a problem, is a problem. Yes, the hitters are getting better and they scored. I pointed out my power rankings this week, but before last Monday, the Cardinals had scored 7 runs or more 3 times this year. They did that 3 times this week. Like there's been improvements in hitting, but the problem is the pitching is not so strong that it's going to just keep rolling the way that it has been. I think there's some guys that are going to be okay and some guys that aren't, but the problem is they're wasting this good pitching that they're getting now without assurances that it's going to be good moving forward. That's a front office issue. That's not what we expected. I think some of it's a front office issue. The fact that Walker's not hitting better and Carlson's not hitting better. A lot of these guys are not hitting better. Is partly on the front office. But on the whole, the real issue with the front office is they don't have a 5th starter. They barely have a 4th starter.
Well,
and I
yeah.
think that's pretty worrisome.
The reality's hit home here lately because the Cardinals, if you look at where they are in terms of starting pitching ranking and for earned run average, they're 4.82. They're 25th in the majors. For the month of May, their starting pitching ERA 6.02. That is the worst in the majors. So this is this rotation, if we're looking at it as a whole, is not very good at all. And I'm being polite. It's actually bad. There are a couple of exceptions. I mean, I think we give Sonny Gray a mulligan for a couple bad starts. I think Kyle Gibson's been fine. I think he's exceeded expectations. I think Lynn is definitely not done what I thought he would do, just in terms of innings. And you have Michaelis. Listen, two pretty good starts in a row.
Two good
So,
starts. Michaelis. One of them short rest, no less.
but you just don't know. You just don't know pretty much what you're going to expect from time to time. So it's hard to have confidence in him like over a long period of time. So it's as easy to conclude because the numbers back it up loudly. I mean, the starting pitching has, after a really encouraging beginning to the season has really gone in the wrong direction. And so they're going to need to score 7 runs or more a lot because unless there's some improvement here or unless they reinforce it from the outside, um, man, it is a really bad situation if your starting pitching is sort of in this deterioration mode that it is now, and you don't really have a choice. You're going to have to score a hell of a lot of runs to compensate for that. So it's kind of like a reversal. Before it was like, oh, the starting pitching's good, but they can't score runs for them. This now it's like, oh, they're scoring a lot of runs, but the starting rotation's not very good. They've kind of switched sides here, which Will, isn't that sort of what you expect when we're talking about a bad team? You
Well,
know,
that's the thing, right? Yeah, I think you're
yeah,
right. I think that we can talk ourselves be like, man, if they could just get the pitching going at the same time as the hitting. But like, you know who does that are good teams.
right.
And I feel like this is something we've been talking about for a while. Their inability. And listen, the 2 years ago was obviously so fun. And Pools was so fun, all that run. Let's not forget what the first half of that season was like. The first half of that season 2 years ago was exactly like this. The hitting couldn't get going until the pitching couldn't get going, and they were kind of flying back and forth. I feel like we've seen that a lot, really, over the last half decade. And so now that the hitting is coming around, and I think there are guys. I do want to let's actually focus on the hitting for a second because I think there are guys that are coming around. I would say first on that list is frankly Lars Nootbaar. Lars Nootbaar and Alec Burleson are coming around, and this is to the credit of, particularly when it comes to Burleson, a guy that, and everyone listening to this know, I have been very skeptical of for an extended period of time, and you have not been, by the way. So just never let anyone say that I didn't give you credit when you were right about something I was wrong, Bernie. Because Burleson has really been coming along. The power is finally starting to show. My frustration with Burleson has always been, yes, he hits the ball hard, but the warning track power he seems to not be able to hit that many home runs. Those are starting to come along. Nootbaar was a guy I've always felt would be able to hit home runs, and he is. He's starting to get on base a little bit more. Wynn is starting to still be able to. Arenado is still, the power is still kind of missing. Donovan has more homers than Arenado does this year, which is kind of crazy to think about. But certainly, there is there's been movement. Herrera is starting to come around as a hitter. He's really helped the loss of Contreras a little bit. Like that, you can see about the hitting. Gorman is coming along. These guys are starting to come along in a way that you're like, good. Okay, we thought they could hit. They generally can hit. And I think that is exciting. I look at those guys, and to me, Nootbaar feels very sustainable. Health is always the issue with him. But Nootbaar, this is a lineup. When Nootbaar is hitting, they're a lot better. Like when Nootbaar is hitting.
Yeah. And Mason Wynn's been really good.
Yeah, and his first homer, which was great. So like that offense is coming around. But again, now the pitching's starting to falter, but it's not like, oh man, we really thought this pitch. What's wrong with the pitching? How's this not holding up? You could totally see this coming. Like this is actually like now the Cardinals are the mediocre team that I expected them to, that I thought they might be. I don't mean to say they didn't have an upside. I thought they did have an upside this year, and maybe we're seeing that upside and they just fell too far behind in the beginning of the year to get caught back up. But certainly, this is the mediocre team I was expecting. A pretty good offense, maybe even to above average offense, and a rotation that's barely keeping it together. And that is the problem is when they weren't hitting, that put them far enough behind. Let's say right now the Cardinals are a 500 team moving forward. I think they could be a game or two over. Maybe they're an 84-win team right now. I don't mean current record. I mean, they're playing like an 84-win team right now. The problem is they got this miserable start that they just have to hope that the third wildcard spot continues to be just try to get to 500 and sneak in. And that is regardless of how disappointed they are with the offense or how they thought it was going to be better. This is what the team is and really what it was. And last year was a downside version of that. Maybe they get an upside version of that. But the fact remains, as constructed, and let's not forget, the Cardinals are not considered to have a particularly strong farm system, right? All the farm system rankings are coming out right now. MLB Pipeline has three Cardinals in the top 100, one of which is Mason Wynn, one of which is Victor Scott II, and one of which is Tink Hintz. And so, I think that, there's not a huge, strong farm system. The more and more you look at this from a macro sense, the Cardinals look kind of like what they are, a 500 team, maybe. And I don't know. I kind of thought that's maybe not what the Cardinals were not supposed to be.
Yeah, I give them credit for They don't beat themselves, generally speaking, in terms of their defense, which is really good. It's a real benefit to the pitching staff. Also, they run the bases better. I think they're fundamentally sounder. They can play a little small ball. We've talked about that. So I do want to acknowledge that. And I think the bullpen, by and large, has been really good and very good. Like the final 3+ innings of a game, very good. One of the best in the majors. But so there's a couple things there that are solid and I'm actually I'm kind of minimalizing it because I don't want to like get carried away, but there's two areas, the defense slash fundamentals really solid, bullpen really solid. But it's pretty hard to it's going to be really hard to have any kind of sustained winning phase when the starting pitching's on the blink and the offense, once it cools down a little bit, because what they've done in the last 7 games, they're 5-2, but their numbers are outstanding, but they're not sustainable, so they're going to level off there. It's not a formula that screams 90 wins, 92 wins. No, it really isn't. Unless something extraordinary happens with a great number of these hitters, and that's to be determined. I would be skeptical of that, but I'm just saying there's always a possibility that they'll go nuts and start rampaging the way they did late in 2021. They have enough pieces there where they're capable of having a really good offense. I don't quite trust them yet, though, and they still can't hit 4-seam fastballs, as we saw against Nick Pivetta in Boston yesterday.
Okay, so the macro look at this, you always know that the Cardinals are not off to a good, not in a good period when you see a lot of John Mozeliak. Like as a general rule, he always a lot of times he will do those pregame in the dugout. State of the team, everyone's angry, everyone's worried, press conferences or just interviews with Jim Hayes. And they are generally a sign of kind of coming down and kind of talking to the people and calming everyone. And generally speaking, the calming everyone, this is all going to work out notion has been organizational, strategy for a while. That's been modus operandi. It's what they do. They believe this all works out in the long run. And I think increasingly that's not working and people are recognizing that. And so you're seeing more often of these kind of interviews. And John Mozeliak talked to Frank Cusimano on KSDK last evening. I'm going to play a couple excerpts of that because hey, that's what we do now. I'm just playing
Sure.
stuff. Shout out to Frank Cusimano on KSDK. I'm going to put two things about this and we'll talk about it. First off, I want us to give something. I actually did not like the builder with the third interview last week. I actually thought this was a shorter interview. But I think the interview is more complicated and more interesting than some of the clips that are in here. I did find it kind of weird that Frank Cusimano asked about Trevor Bauer. I thought that was kind of weird because, I thought Moseliak's comment was basically like there are certain things that I know everybody thinks we are desperate. We are not so desperate to sign that guy. Was basically what he said, which
Sure.
which of course got a bunch of people yelling at him like, well, you should be more desperate. But by answering that question, you're gonna piss off a bunch of people and whatever. However you answer that question, some people are going to be mad. Secondly, for God's sake, the Cardinals need a fifth starter. Stay the hell away from Trevor Bauer, for God's sake. And so I thought Moseliak's answer was straightforward in a way that I think was I appreciated on that. Here he is talking about him being responsible. There's a 2-part clip to him being responsible, and I think perhaps most interestingly, how fans feel about him as this kind of goes along. Here's the first clip. Where it is? There's.
Do you worry at all about your job security?
Do I?
Yeah.
Not in the sense that most people think about it. Like, I certainly understand I'm responsible for this, and I know if it doesn't go right, then I should be held accountable for it. But if I were to never work another day again in baseball, I'll be okay. I'll figure out something to do. Like, it's not where I was, 15, 20 years ago, and I would have been fired. It would have been very much more devastating. And, but I take a lot of pride in what I do and what we try to do here as an organization. And, I hope it doesn't end that way, but I certainly understand it's possible.
Okay, and here's the second clip.
Emily understands not to read things and not to follow social media. I will say, like, it's hard for someone like myself to just say, "Oh, I can ignore it," because that's impossible. I certainly get the sense that the city is tiring of me, and the vocal minority is getting louder and louder, and the only thing that can change that course is we start playing better.
Okay, so two things. First off, the fan base getting tired of him, and on one hand, that I think that is inevitably true. It is also worth noting for all the love we had for Tony La Russa, 2011, the fan base was sick of Tony La Russa. In 2011, remember when people were furious when he made that Rasmus trade. It turned out to be great, but like there was a lot of talk in 2011 about how like you know what, it's possible that La Russa has just been here too long. Like it's about like at a certain level, all the stuff that made you love La Russa started to exhaust you about La Russa after he'd been there for 15 years, and Mozeliak has been there essentially that long. And I think at a certain level that that tone that Mozeliak has, which is um, forever. So even when the Cardinals were going great, has always been kind of everyone calm down, everything is fine, everything is good. I certainly hear the criticism, but you can't take that to heart. You have to take pride in what you're doing, and so on. That I think has increasingly become to be seen as patronizing and a kind of like coming down from the ivory tower sort of idea. But the difference is I think this is where Mozeliak is wrong. 'Cause I think he's generally right about the larger thing that people do get tired of people. But you know what they really get tired of? They get tired of you when you don't win. And I think that speaks to the first part of that clip where he talks, which I think is really interesting. It's something I actually also understand as someone getting older, the notion of urgency can't help but change. Like 15 years ago, he's proven himself. He's got to prove himself. He's got to win championships. He's fighting for his supper. At a certain level, he's won World Series rings here. He has had a long run of success. His family is comfortable. He's done well. He gets to wear sweater vests of increasing quality. At a certain level, he has proven whatever thing that he could do, the thing that he wanted to prove that he could do. Now this has taken a turn, and he could argue it's because of maybe he thinks he should take more responsibility or he thinks it's unfair or whatever. But at a certain level, the notion of him getting fired, and I thought this was really interesting, is different than it would have been 10 years ago. 10 years ago, he would have been devastated by it, correctly so, because he was like, wow, I failed. I never got a chance to do the thing that I wanted to do. He has had a lot of success as general manager, and so therefore getting fired now would hurt him less. And I think that's a really interesting thing to say, because on one hand, I think as a personal level, it's probably true. And I think it's a human and understandable thing to respond to. On the other hand, as a Cardinals fan, what do I care about your personal, like how you would handle this personally? I want you to have the urgency to try to win. And I think that is the thing that when we talk about certain inertia kind of getting into the front office and certain of sameness and certain comfort and certain smugness, I actually think that's what it is. It's not that people have gotten lazy. It's not that people don't care anymore. It's not that people have just gotten dismissive. It's just that at a certain level, everyone's like, man, we've been good for like a long time. We're going to continue to be good. And if we're not going to be good, look at the stuff we've done. And I think that has settled in to the front office, to the ownership. I don't think it's settled in for Marmol. I think, and what everyone's thoughts about Marmol, and we talked to him last week, I think he still is managing with urgency, not always perfectly, but certainly with urgency. But I think this is what people are talking about when they talk about the front office and that kind of frustration. The sense of, you know what, I've already done it. And listen, after the Cardinals won 2011, I thought, man, if the Cardinals win another World Series, is Mozeliak a Hall of Famer? Because I had to think you had to consider he had 3 World Series and built all this stuff up. That's no longer a conversation anymore, obviously. But I think it speaks to the notion that at some point, the Cardinals were like, look at what we've done. Appreciate our accomplishments. We appreciate our accomplishments, and lost a little bit of their edge. And I think that's perfectly understandable and reasonable as a human being. But I want the team to win. And that urgency clearly, I think, has led to the slippage that we've seen the last few years.
It's not just that they're not winning. I think, listen, I think, to the point where they've been a tremendously successful organization. It's true. The facts bear that out. But they won 32 postseason games. Mozeliak's first 8 seasons running the baseball department. They won 32, which was, I think, most in the majors. Maybe second, no worse than second. But in his last 8 seasons through last year, they've won 4. So that sums it up. It's some to me. There's no other thing that personifies the sort of the decay of the baseball operation and the organization and the ability to develop players, make good payroll decisions, and so on and so forth. And the problem is, like, I'm only speaking for myself, and I don't think I think there's a lot of people who aren't as reasonable as I am, quite frankly. But uh, a 71-91 was awful, and no one's gonna. I'm not trying to gloss it over. But if that was just sort of a really really good team, it was just one of those years. What the hell are you going to do? They'll be better next year. Okay. I can live with that, but they once again have shown, and this is the problem where it is, and I've talked about this a lot. It is a combination of arrogance, complacency, hubris, whatever, however you want to put it. They still think, well, because our model was so good for so long, and he alluded to his model last night. They still think they're smarter than they are. They really do believe they're somehow smarter above most of the other teams. Oh, we know what we're doing. Well, clearly they do not know what they're doing because they've let pitching development just die. They don't respond with urgency to really really critical flaws that can take your whole season down. In fact, they go into the next season with the same set of problems where they've made some progress, but they didn't really complete the job. So therefore, the problem is still severe as it was last year, just about. And it isn't just that they had a crappy season in 2023. It's just that they didn't learn from it. And they're still repeating the same things that got them to 71-91. They're still stuck in this outdated, stale, moldy, hopelessly not aloof, hopelessly just kind of out of it sense of reality. They're not engaged with the kind of urgency that they need to have. Listen, I'm a big believer in people that screw up, whether it be whatever their job is. If you've done a good job, you have a good employee record. Okay, you have a one screw up. I get it. We don't like it, but you get the benefit of the doubt. But they've lost the benefit of the doubt because there is no infinite period where you still get to take credit for stuff that happened 15 years ago. I mean, that's just not how it goes in professional sports. That doesn't exist, quite frankly. Even Bill Belichick, basically, they were like, we're tired of you.
Yeah, and then nobody else wanted to hire him.
Right. So it's like, this idea that, like, well, we've won a lot and we've had a lot of success and we're proud of what we do. Okay. You're entitled to do it, but there's an expiration date for that. That doesn't last forever. The accomplishments last forever, but the accomplishments in terms of living off them at a time where you should be doing things differently, more aggressively, more forward thinking, being really, really proactive about preventing something from going really bad when you had the chance to be proactive, like their pitching development. They're just way behind the curve, and they're way behind in their thinking. And that's why they're, since the start of last season, only the Rockies have won fewer games than any team in the National League. This is not an accident. This was allowed to happen, and hubris is a root cause. And this idea, like, we're okay. Look at all we've done for this. Look at all we've done for these people. It just, that's not how it goes in pro sports. It just is not how it works in pro sports. And I would say with the proliferation of social media and all kinds of platforms and Substack and just anything you want to mention, where there's never been, for better or for worse, there's never been the volume of opinions, especially a team that is important to so many people as a Cardinal, where there's a lot of people. It's just not left to the newspaper anymore the way it was back in the olden days. I mean, everybody can sound off. Everybody can have their voice heard. Everyone can express how they feel. And there's an audience for it to various degrees, but there's a huge audience for that. And they still seem to think they're still operating at a time where it's like, well, we need to work with the Post-Dispatch and get our message out better or something like that. Right. That's just not how it works anymore. It just simply doesn't work that way anymore. And it's just sort of an example of how moldy they've become because they still think they don't even understand media now. They don't. They have no idea. and they still think they can kind of do what they did in the past. They think that that's just media stuff. That's just messaging stuff. But the worst thing about it is they still think they can do what they did in the past, baseball wise, except they're not doing that because in the past they knew how to develop pitching at large volumes and large quality. So but it's like, have you not recognized? I think he acknowledged in an interview with Cusimano, he did acknowledge their failure in terms of pitching development, but that just didn't happen. This has been in progress for several years at least. What were you doing about it? The answer is nothing. So anyway,
Yeah, I think that I am. Listen, he is not. Mozeliak is not the first person to have early success early in their career and be like, all right, I did it. And not and relax. It's a human thing to do. I don't think it's a terrible thing. I don't think it makes him a terrible person. I
no,
don't have, it's funny, I was watching that interview and, obviously you look underneath and when you watch the clips, you look underneath, everyone's so mad on, people are mad at him about not signing Trevor Bauer and they're mad at him
yeah.
about this smugness.
They're gonna be mad about everything. So
Which
whatever.
is fine, which is whatever. But at a certain level, I don't watch Mozeliak. I actually kind of never have watched Mozeliak and felt like, what a smug jerk. I mean, there's a smugness to him. There is. Sometimes he uses that for comedic effect. I think whenever he does interviews with, he was on Jimmy Hayes' old podcast a couple of times and kind of made fun of Hayes in a kind of a funny way. I don't think that, I do not find him, he does not get my blood boiling. He doesn't get my blood boiling. I would say the interview with DeWitt third might have done that a little bit more, but I feel like it's because I don't really know him as well. So, and I'm probably attaching things to DeWitt the third that may not actually be there and may be involved in other people in macroeconomic sort of senses. But when it comes to Mo, I appreciate what Mo has done for the Cardinals because he's done a lot. There's no doubt about it. If Mo retires tomorrow, I will not look at him and say that guy screwed up the Cardinals. I won't. I won't because there were great moves that he made, but I will probably wish that there would have been a more once that edge that he's talking about. That's what he's talking about when he talks about how this would have killed me more to get fired 10 years ago than if it happens now. That's what it means. That's what getting older is the idea of Bernie, at the start of your career, let's say you'd been at the Post-Dispatch for 3 years and they were like, nope, we're getting rid of you. It's not working. That would have killed you. That would because you're trying to build it, right? You're trying to build it. You're trying to establish a name, and then you're there for a long time. And after a certain level, everybody knows who Bernie is. And so, if there's a change later, if there's a change that something goes on, I think of Sports on Earth, the old site that I did. They shut that site down, but by that point, I'd done Deadspin. I'd established myself in New York. I was writing books. I was disappointed that Sports on Earth closed, but I also didn't feel like it was a referendum on who I was as a human being and what I'd done. That is a perfectly reasonable, no, I would argue, it's very normal, very reasonable things. We've established, you and I would argue, have both established a lot of good stuff in our lives, and we're still doing a lot of good stuff. But also, you can't take the old stuff away. It's good stuff. We're proud of it. People will know us for it, and I'm proud of it. I love doing this podcast. Hopefully, that will be along the same sort of thing. It is perfectly understandable for Mo to have that idea. The problem is you're still in charge of the team right now. You're still in charge of the team now. And that kind of idea that I'd be a little bit upset if I got fired. Great. But you know why you're getting fired? Because this thing that people made, that you made, that you're a part of, that people care about so much, it's faltered. They still care as much about this, even if you don't. And that is the thing that I think is probably the most telling thing from that interview. It didn't make me think he's a jerk. I don't think he's a jerk. I don't think he's a jerk. I don't think he's incompetent. I don't have that frothing at the mouth thing about Mo, but I certainly
I don't either.
I don't. I never have. But I do. But do I think that he is the guy? Watching that interview, he's like, yeah, if I get fired, it stinks. You want to hear him. You want him like Pat Riley. Pat Riley, that's a guy that's accomplished a bunch in his life and still calls out Jimmy Butler and still says it's unacceptable that we lose in the first round. I'm ashamed. We're the Miami Heat. We're not supposed to be like this. What is going on? I'm going to get to the bottom of it and I'm going to fix it. And Mo, that's not his response. Again, perfectly understandable human idea, but it's yeah, if I get fired, I mean, I've accomplished a lot in my career. It just wouldn't hurt me as much as it used to. That's an honest answer. But man, as a Cardinal fan, that's not the answer I want.
No.
That's not the answer I want.
Listen, I'm really surprised he's been in this job so long and he is still so terrible about, delivering messages and speaking to the public and explaining things, because he manages to get everyone, even during calmer times, he manages to get people like so turned off. Now they're furious and they associate him with the failure, as they should. But the messaging has always been pretty much a disaster. And I know there was a time that he worked with a, media relations consultant who's pretty good, and that they stopped doing that. And I think that's kind of where the messaging just went off the tracks and became a real liability for them. Um, but the only reason I'm talking about messaging is this. And you've heard me say this a lot, and I know our listeners have heard me say this a lot, and I've written about it a lot. But this has never been about John Mozeliak. He's in charge. It's always been about Bill DeWitt and John Mozeliak working as a team. John Mozeliak does absolutely nothing. Okay, maybe he can sign a minor leaguers or a Rule 5 draft, or sign somebody to a $2 million contract, whatever. But anything even remotely significant, he doesn't do anything without Bill DeWitt being in on the discussions, and Bill Witt, in effect, making the final decision whether to greenlight it or not. I mean, and listen, all owners on the big stuff will greenlight it or say no. But I'm not talking about at the highest level. I'm not talking about like $300 million contracts. Bill DeWitt is part of every baseball decision. That's one of the reasons why I can't hate on Mo, other than to be, kind of annoyed with him, but also to be sad that DeWitt and Mo let this thing fall apart the way they did, because it didn't have to be this way. That's what really stinks about it. It could have been prevented. It really could have, but they're too busy, patting themselves on the back for all their achievements. They let the present and the future slip away. But that's why Mo is not a good voice for the franchise, and people get infuriated when he does his thing. But I don't lose sight of the fact, like, okay, messaging is one thing and it's important, but it's actually how they're running this thing. And he and Bill DeWitt are a team. And for some reason in this market, it's never really been portrayed that way that much. I portray it that way all the time because it's true. That part of it gets lost, and I'm not sure how. It's like with Bill DeWitt, the criticism is payroll, whatever. But they leave DeWitt out of the actual personnel decisions. It's payroll. With Mozeliak, it's kind of like personnel. That's it, and Bill DeWitt's giving them enough money to win and blah. No, they're all linked together. All of this is in one thing. They're a team. Mozeliak does operate under a payroll, but Mozeliak doesn't spend as well as he should with the payroll that he does have. So the baseball part screwed up. The ownership part is part of the baseball stuff that's been screwed up. So I think when they were winning, I think both men deserved enormous credit as a team. But now that this thing's gone really bad, they deserve criticism as a team. It's not one over the other. It's both of them.
Yeah, and the fact is listen, Mo was a bad messenger when they were winning, but people didn't care.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Because they were winning, and now they're not. And so we'll see. But
But by the way, can I say one more thing real quick? And I'm sorry, because I was watching that last night. I thought the one thing when Kuz asked him about, afraid of getting fired or losing your job, and he said, not in the sense that most people think about it. Well, I don't know how to take that, and I honestly could be misinterpreting what he meant. But I hope it wasn't that he was like, in effect, saying, well, I'm under contract for, through 2025. So I don't sit here and think I'm going to get the phone call. If that's what he meant, then that's really a shame. But it also tells you he believes won't be fired by Bill DeWitt, because they work as a team and they're very loyal to each other. And so in that sense, he doesn't have anything to worry about in terms of security, at least until his contract's up. But and this is something I want to ask you about, and we talked about it briefly last week. However, don't you think this thing's heading to a point where the best thing for everybody would be for Mo to basically say, I've tried. It's time to turn it over to someone else, and he bows out gracefully, somewhat gracefully at the end of this season. To me, that would make a lot of sense if indeed Heimblum is the successor in place. That might be the best way to handle all this. They're not for people waiting and praying and lighting candles that DeWitt's going to like wake up the next time they lose 4 in a row and he's going to fire him right now. It's not going to happen. I could see something happening at the end of the season, but I could also see Mozeliak being the one who propels that and who basically pushes for that and tells Bill DeWitt, look, I really think we need to start over. And I don't think me going to the final year of the contract, and I don't want another contract. I don't think I'm the guy to do it. So let's make that transition. And I would really respect that if he does it. But I think it might be the best way to go. I really do, unless they have some kind of incredible run, incredible second half or final 4 months or whatever you want to put it. So do you see that scenario where he would just gracefully move to the exit to let Heimblum take over?
I mean, maybe. I mean, I think Michael Gersh would have something to say about him.
Well, no, they can't have this. See, if you do that, if Bill DeWitt does that, right, then, oh my, good luck. I hope you draw 2 million people like 3 or 4 years from
Yeah,
now.
and listen, I don't even think that's necessarily Gersh's fault. It's just that like he's associated with Mo and Bloom isn't. Also, but this is actually an extra thing. Bloom's got something to prove. Like I actually think he got our friend
Sure.
Joe Sheehan has written before about Heimblum. He really felt like what he did in Boston was actually quite good. And the worst thing that he did in Boston was he was forced to trade Mookie Betts when he didn't want to. And Bloom was the one that kind of got stuck with the one being the one that did that. But more to the point, Bloom is like hungry. Like, you know what? If Bloom were to get fired, he would react to it the way that Mo would have reacted to it 10 years ago. I'm sure he did react to it in Boston.
Good point.
He probably felt like a failure. He probably felt like things went wrong. This was his big chance. He tried to do some good things and he got fired and he's hungry and he wants to fix that. That to me is the thing to be excited about Bloom. I mean, he's a smart guy and I think he's made a lot of good moves, but the difference that you're talking about is like, let's say, like imagine if you remember how upset the Brewers were when David Stearns left there to go to the Mets? They were upset. That's like they're a smart guy. They really liked that guy. They wanted him to stay. In the same way that they were sad to see Counsell leave. Does anyone think that if Mo left the Cardinals, that he would get a general manager job anywhere?
No.
No. And it's not because he hasn't done things. I think 10 years ago, if he would have left, there would have been a lot of jobs for him. But there aren't now. And I think that speaks to that general idea, that hunger, that normal human being hunger, it's a little bit gone. It's hard to keep that up over 20 years. This is why people get tired of people. It's not because they get sick of looking at their face. It's because they start to lose that hunger a little bit. They start to lose that drive. They slip. They rest on their laurels. They get comfortable. Normal things, not damnable offenses, does not make him a horrible person. But, it does make you think that maybe someone else should be in charge. The idea of him doing that, I'll put it this way. Watching that interview, he didn't have that Jeff Albert look of, I'm sick of this crap. Like, just leave me alone. Like, he didn't have that look, right? Like, Albert, like, famous was like, I'm tired of people yelling at me all the time. Leave me alone. And he may have been correct, by the way, in that, but certainly, like, because now they're yelling at Turner Ward, but certainly Jeff Albert made the decision of, you know what, I could make more money here next year. They don't seem the team itself does not seem unhappy with me, but I don't want to do this. Like, this is not how I want to spend my life, is getting yelled by like this. Mo doesn't look that way. He looks like he'd be perfectly fine giving it another year and trying to get it turned around. And I'm sure he says he hears the criticism, but he doesn't really seem that. It doesn't seem to have spurred him into a new realm of righteous fury. And that makes me wonder about the graciously step asides in it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's not going to be fired by Bill DeWitt before the contract's over. So it would be up to him to take the initiative. And if he really, that's why I have no use whatsoever for whenever John Mozeliak uses the term, well, if we don't turn this around and we don't win, I'm accountable. No, actually, you're not, because your boss isn't going to fire you, because you guys are close friends and you're allies and you're partners in this. So no, actually, you're not going to be held accountable. But as I wrote in a column last week, I think, or maybe 2 weeks ago, he can hold himself accountable. He can say, I've given it my best shot. I'm disappointed. I think we need some new leadership, and I'm just going to go ahead and announce my resignation at the end of this season. I think
Retirement.
a lot of
He can call it retirement.
yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people would respect him for that, because that's a guy that would be walking away knowing that one of his best friends in life and his baseball partner, Bill DeWitt Jr., is going to live up to what he said and let Mo finish his contract. Well, if you're really going to be held accountable, then you can take charge of that and just say, no, you know what? I'm going to retire after this season. It's time to turn it over to somebody else.
And go ahead. Sorry.
So no, I mean, I'm I'm putting myself in a frame of mind that I think it would be ridiculous if things continue as they are. I think it would actually be really ridiculous to come back with the same leadership in place baseball wise, the same leadership being DeWitt and Mozeliak. It would just be DeWitt's not going anywhere. So it would be really, 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 it would be so damaging to them. If they think people are mad now, then you just come back with the same people making the same types of decisions. Ooh, I don't know. Unless they could dress it up by giving Heim Bloom some fancy title or something for 25. I don't know. But they need to, the end of the era is over. They need to just recognize that all good things, in fact, do pass. Just ask Bill Belichick about that. It is a, what have you done for me? Not even lately, but it's like, what have you done for me? Oh, over the last few years or so, not much, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that last half of 2 years ago was wonderful because Pujols played like vintage Pujols out of nowhere, and they had Goldschmidt and Arenado at their best.
Yep.
And they deserve credit for those moves. I'm not saying they don't deserve credit for those moves, but and listen, for what it's worth, there's still somehow only 3 games out of the wild card. Like the NL is very, very weak at the bottom of the NL wild card. So who knows? They've got this week this week is a tough test, to say the very least. Orioles at home, Cubs at home. I will come out feeling if this could be like a 4-2 week like they just had, that'll buy me some time with this team, because this is a tough stretch coming up. 4-2 would be quite an achievement, and frankly, we're the time of year where you need to start doing well in series like this. So, because the 4-2 is no joke.
Absolutely,
these are good teams. Okay, we had some nice notes this week, but unfortunately, you're all getting usurped for nepotism reasons, because my school is already out here in Athens, Georgia, if you can believe that. So my son William Leitch is here right now. Hello, William. Say hello. He has the championship game in his little league tonight. He's pitching tonight. He's a crafty lefty. I'd say he's got I'd say he's got real John Tudor vibes on the mound. His similar angular face and hangdog countenance. But no, just kidding. Anyway, so he wants to ask Bernie a question to close out before we finish the podcast. So William, go ahead and ask Bernie a question.
Okay, Bernie, here's my question for you. Do you think Arenado will ever get his power back? Because he hasn't had a lot of power this year.
Good question. No, I don't. Now listen, there's various degrees of this. He can still hit for power, but he stopped pulling the ball in the air to left field, and that's where he used to draw all of his power strength from in terms of home runs. Putting the ball in the air, hitting it to left field. That was kind of his, that was it. I mean, that was it. Boom. That's what he did. He doesn't do that anymore. I mean, he hits the opposite field a lot more. He hits the ball to center field a lot more. He can still hit for I think a respectable total of home runs, but in terms of 30 plus home runs, I think those days are over. I could be wrong, but I think those days are done. I really do. Good question.
I mean, he only had 26 last year.
Right.
And in the second half, he had 7. So, in this year, he's got 3. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. And listen, I think he has finagled himself into a more productive hitter than we saw for the first month of the year. I think he's a smart guy. He's crafty. He's working his way back into something. But the homers feel like they're going to be accidents of his approach rather than results of his approach.
Right. I actually appreciate the way he's adjusted. And he is accounting for the fact that, okay, I no longer can do this one thing that I lived on for so many years, but I have to face up to the fact that that part's not there. It's not there the way it was and may not ever be there again. So I've got to find a way to make myself useful. I got to find a way to still help the team. I can drive in runs. There's other ways to do it. So I think he is a smart guy, and I give him credit for adjusting, because as we know, aging hitters, man, they can be awfully slow to sort of square up to reality, you know? So I appreciate him.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well,
Good luck. Good luck tonight.
Oh yeah, it's Rook and Pawn against Chase Park Championship. For those old music nuts, by the way, the great drive-by truckers producer and former member of what's the name of I forgot the name of the band. The band that Jesus, I forgot the name of the band because anyway, David Barbie. Dave Barbie, longtime music producer. He is the producer of the Drive-By Truckers. He is a longtime member of a baseball coach here in Athens. He played in Sugar with Bob Mould. For those who like Sugar back then.
Oh, yeah.
He contributed a lot of songs on that. If you look at the album cover, he's on the album cover. He's the coach of the team that we're playing tonight. Dave is a wonderful guy. He helped me a ton with the Time Has Come book, but we're going to beat his ass tonight. William's going to go get him, William. All right. Have a one. Oh, Bernie, we'll be back. I'm sorry to get questions. We got a lot of stuff, but thank you for everybody that reached out. Hope we hit everything you wanted. We'll be back. Maybe we'll go Tuesday because it's Memorial Day.
Sure. Whatever. Memorial Day will work for me. But if you want to go Tuesday, it makes sense. That's fine.
Well, so I think there's an afternoon game on Monday. That's the only reason.
Sure.
So, otherwise, have a wonderful Memorial Day, everyone. Put the wieners on the grill and hot dogs. That's what I mean. Geez, these middle school kids and their dirty brains. All right. Have a good one, Bertie. We'll talk next week.